everyone. I am Cezanne Camacho. I teach deep learning and computer vision at Udacity. And today I'm with Kyle Samani, who is the co-founder and managing partner at Multicoin Capital. Maybe you could tell us a bit about what Multicoin does.
Hey, Cezanne. Thanks so much for having me. Super excited to be on. So Multicoin Capital is a crypto fund. We're based in Austin, Texas. We spend all of our energy focused on the crypto space. We invest in protocols and in companies, going all the way from two guys or gals with an idea, all the way up through Bitcoin and everything in the middle. We will use derivatives, we'll go long and short. We will invest in illiquid, kind of early stage projects and buy things on the public markets. Our investment mandate is to just invest in the crypto ecosystem and invest in things that are crypto native. So although we kind of follow the security token space, we don't invest in, if someone puts Apple stock on a blockchain, we're not going to invest in that. But we spend all of our time in the crypto space, and we think it's the coolest thing in the world, and we want to invest in some of the most awesome protocols and companies building in this technology.
So if you're at a party and someone asks you, what is blockchain? What do you say to them?
So FYI, I only go to parties where everyone already knows what blockchain is.
Only the crypto, the people in the know. Yeah.
No, I'm just playing. So a blockchain is a ledger or a database, like any other database, with a couple interesting differences. One is that the database is hosted by many, many people. So whereas a typical database is hosted by one company or one person, or is hosted on one computer and controlled by that one person or that one entity, a blockchain is stored on many, many computers, and no one person can just go randomly manipulate stuff in the database. The ledger is append only, so you can only add new entries to it. Once you've added something to it, you cannot take anything back. And then all these people, I think in the case of Bitcoin, there are something like 100,000 computers all over the world today that are maintaining a copy of this ledger. So even if 50,000 of those computers blew up tomorrow, the ledger is still totally intact.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the very simple definition of a blockchain.
In addition to people asking what is blockchain, another kind of common big question I get is what is the big deal? Why are so many people and investors interested in blockchain generally? What are the traits that really are drawing people in?
Yeah, so I just think it's kind of this, I think in the last 12 months, it's been this kind of a little bit of people's eyes have woken up, is the price went up, and that causes people to go take a second look. They kind of pay attention. The kind of core concept is really fundamentally unchanged since Bitcoin launched in 2009. But there's some pretty powerful ideas here. The first is that you can have self-sovereign money. So if you think about US dollars, right? So you've got a green piece of paper, you put it in your wallet. It's more or less like your green piece of paper, and absent someone holding a gun to your head, it's your green piece of paper, and no one can take it away from you. But as soon as you go from green pieces of paper in your wallet to a digital bank account, and you deposit that green piece of paper into an ATM, well, now you really are no longer sovereign, in that if Bank of America just says you can't withdraw money anymore, then you can't withdraw money anymore. If the IRS puts a freeze on your account, whatever, so once you go from physical cash to digital money, in all governments in all countries around the world today, you as the person who owns the money, or it's really no longer your money. It's now you have a claim on the money, and Bank of America has the money, and theoretically you have a claim on it, and they will honor your claim, but they have the money.
Right.
And that's a very subtle difference. But it has pretty profound implications on lots of things. So you can't transfer money after 5 p.m., can't transfer money on weekends, bank holidays, exorbitant fees, people can freeze your accounts. There's all kinds of weird second and third order kind of effects of the fact that you actually don't control your money. Yeah. And so one of the really profound breakthroughs of Bitcoin and really all cryptocurrencies is that you as a consumer can be sovereign, self-sovereign, and have money. And literally no one in the world can take that away from you, absent putting a gun to your head. And you can travel across borders, you can travel anywhere, and the system will work, and it cannot be taken away from you. And that is a fundamentally unique thing. Yeah. So that's one of the things that as people are kind of opening their eyes to the power of what that means for empowering consumers, I think that's a very, very profound kind of impact in how the world is going to work.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think When I think of the US dollar especially, it's something that I feel lucky where it feels like a fairly stable market. I don't have like a lot of distrust in my bank, that kind of thing, but I could definitely imagine perhaps elsewhere where stability or even like sort of like censorship or of like what you can do with your money is an issue, that this could be something really interesting. And like along those lines, I'm wondering about blockchain. I see its use in cryptocurrency, and I'm also thinking it's much bigger than that. And I'm wondering where you think it's going to impact the world. Like what kind of industries do you see blockchain affecting now and maybe like in future?
Yeah, so I think the single biggest use case for crypto and blockchains are for kind of what I would call creating a global digital reserve asset. So you can call it digital gold, you can call it digital money, but something that it's an asset that no government can take away from you. They can't print new money of it. I think that's like a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. I think it's a huge opportunity. There's all kinds of other interesting use cases. So one of my favorites is this idea of digital assets. So we invested in a protocol 6, 7, 8 months ago called Tari. They just came out of stealth mode maybe a month or two ago. And Tari is building a brand new blockchain that has two really strong features that are kind of built at the core. One is privacy, using this new technology called Mimblewimble. Seriously. Mimblewimble. And the second is they're building a super strong focus on digital assets. And so they want people to, if a concert venue, if a venue for a concert issues tickets, right? They want to be able to issue those on the Tari protocol and make it super easy. If airline, you've got airline miles. Starbucks, you've got loyalty points, right? Like there's all of these different businesses that like, you can call them, they have a currency, they have these either fungible or non-fungible assets, like tickets to a seat, whatever. All of these things like today are managed in these disparate proprietary databases, and like they're not fungible, they're very hard to work with, they're all kind of clunky. I think there's a really kind of strong, empowering concept of a consumer being able to say, no, here's my ticket, I can see my claim, I'm going to see this Taylor Swift concert next Tuesday, whatever, right? And it's not that Ticketmaster has it. No. Like I have my ticket. I can see that it's my ticket. If I choose to sell my ticket, I can choose to sell my ticket. But it's not sitting on Ticketmaster's database. That would apply for owning stock in a company, right? This would apply for any debt, like anything. So I think this is a really profound concept. Today, all of these digital assets are all stored in different databases, but hosted by different companies all over the place. And there's no way to make sense of it in kind of a unified way. Yeah. So I'm really excited about the opportunity for digital assets on blockchains. Another thing I'm super excited about is a new protocol that launched recently called Augur. Yeah, Augur is a really cool concept. So it is a global prediction market. So there's like a few major categories of predictions. One would be like predicting the price of a stock or some asset at some future point in time, basically like an option. You can actually really broaden this to just kind of be any form of derivative contract. But another really common form of prediction markets would be sports betting. Yeah. And a third would be betting on politics.
So Augur exists right now, right?
Augur launched on July 9th, so just a few weeks ago. And it is a prediction market where anyone can create a market for anything. The entire thing runs on the Ethereum blockchain. And you cannot, like, no person in the world can stop the system. Like the entire Augur team could disappear tomorrow. Off the planet Earth, and the system would keep running.
I like these extreme scenarios, just to sort of prove the robustness of something like this.
It's pretty remarkable, and so anyone anywhere in the world can create any market, and then anyone anywhere in the world can come and bet on the outcomes of that market.
So like you can submit any sort of like yes/no question or something.
Anything that you can submit anything as long as if people want to come bet on it, if they want to take odds and put bets on it, then they can take odds and put bets on it.
Do you happen to know, like off the top of your head, like what the most popular question is on there right now?
So I think at the current moment, the market with the largest number of outstanding interest is the price of Ethereum at the end of the year. Oh. I think it's at $500 at the end of the year. I think that's the largest market. But so the system's been up for 2 or 3 weeks. I think they've created somewhere on the order of 900 markets. There's been about $2 million that's been bet through the system. And what's so cool is the thing is entirely decentralized and peer-to-peer. There is no central authority in the system. If you think about a prediction market, like one of the hard problems is like if you don't want a centralized person like controlling the system, well, after the event is over, someone needs to flip a switch and say like Trump won or Hillary won, or like the price of Ether was over 500 or less than 500 or whatever, right? And if you want to be able to support any conceivable logic, then like how do you do this in a decentralized way? And Augur is a very clever solution where there are some fees in the system. The fees are very low, but there are some fees. And the idea is that once a market is once like a prediction market is officially over, people who own rep tokens are the native token of the Augur network. Those people will be asked, and they will say, "Hey, this market is over. Please vote and say what happened." All right. Who won
voting
the soccer?
like on the truth, like the
Voting
final
on the truth.
result.
Just say what happened, right? Who won the soccer game? Who won the election? Whatever. And in exchange for doing that, those people get a percentage of the fees. You might say, well, what's their motivation for telling the truth or lying? And so the idea is in the system is that if you vote against the majority, like let's say you said Hillary won the election, right? If you say that, then part of your Augur tokens, instead of receiving part of those fees, some of your Augur tokens will be automatically burned and taken away from you. And so the whole idea is the whole system is intentionally circular, and that you should vote on whatever you think everyone else is going to vote for.
The majorities are rules.
Right. But like everyone is likely going to just vote the truth. Like how are you going to get, like, right, there's something like 100,000 or 200,000 people around the world who own Augur tokens today. Right, how are you going to get all of these people to collude and say, no, Hillary won the election?
Yeah.
Like that's not going to happen. And so like.
Just maybe wishful thinking.
Wishful thinking perhaps for some, right?
Yeah.
But like it's based on this idea of that like you're never going to be able to get enough people to coordinate to lie about the truth. And so everyone will just honestly report the truth, and they're incentivized to do so because then they will receive some of the fees from the system.
Got it. Okay, so that makes sense. You like have a question, there's some like odds in a typical sort of betting way, and then people are incentivized to tell the truth at the end. I wonder though, like if there are any scenarios where the answer is kind of ambiguous, what would happen? The only thing that's coming to mind right now is like celebrity relationships. Like, did Brad and Angelina like really break up or not? I guess you'd have to like really define what like if like page 6 of the Times or something reports it, is that like your source of truth or something like that. I wonder if there would ever be a divide like that.
I suspect that market probably would not garner too much betting interest.
That's not yet.
Yeah. Also, the problem with especially with markets like that is then the two Brad and whoever are like incentivized to collude and like screw. It's like the boxer throwing the match.
Yeah.
Right.
I see.
So it's just very easy to screw with that. So I suspect there wouldn't be much betting interest. There is a mechanism in the Augur system for people who own the rep tokens who have to ultimately report on the truth. There is a way for them to say this market is invalid.
Okay.
And so like one of the core tenets of Augur is you can't stop anyone from creating market. So like for example, assassination markets have come up already, which like is obviously like it's bad, like it's ethically bad, like we don't want this. You can't stop people from doing it, and so the way that the system is like designed to accommodate this is that rep holders can just say like this is invalid.
Yeah.
And in which case, even if people bet on it, the system like will not resolve, and everyone will just get their money back on whatever they put in.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's a really interesting application. And I also wanted to ask you, so I was reading a couple of the posts on Multicoin's like blog, and you had written something about Web 3.0, sort of like Web 1.0 being this like dial-up AOL Messenger, Web 2.0 being like sort of the current state of like our data is just sort of like out there. And I was wondering if you could talk about Web 3.0 and how blockchain might be used in sort of like a newish version of the web.
So if we say Web 1.0 was like Mosaic, like Netscape, all that stuff.
Netscape.
Right, like the 90s basically of the internet. It was just kind of like, it was clunky, it like theoretically worked, but like not really. Web 2 kind of started around, call it 03, 04 maybe time frame. We started getting kind of consumer SaaS, like online services that were like pretty good. And today, like we have super mature, like sexy, amazing, beautiful applications that can do all range of things. The big problem with the kind of the Web 2 model that we live in right now is that the companies that provide each of these services control the data, right? When you use Google, when you use Facebook, when you use Twitter, when you use whatever, Snapchat, which by the way, they keep your pictures on their servers for a while. I like delete them after some number of months, but it's like not 5 minutes. Right. And so like all of these systems we all use every day now, like these companies have all the control and all the power of all this stuff. And like it's fundamentally all the data is like the consumer's data.
Right.
It's my health data, it's my searching, it's my friends, it's my pictures, right? It's not Facebook's pictures, it's my pictures.
It's like anything you've ever put out there.
Like literally, correct. And like that's kind of the current state of Web 2. And so the Web 3 vision is really about empowering consumers to be self-sovereign so that consumers can control and own their own data, but still be able to have these dynamic, rich applications of things that consumers have come to expect of the internet. And so that's kind of like the grand vision of Web 3. And this means self-sovereign money, self-sovereign data, self-sovereign identity, self-sovereign, like all of these things. Privacy, online privacy. And so that's kind of the vision. And then on a technical basis, right, we're just in the process of like building out the early parts of the technology stack to make all of this possible. So just like right in the the 90s, we needed TCP/IP, and then we needed HTTP, and like a whole host of then we got HTML, and then we got JavaScript, and like these all kind of basic building blocks coming together to like make a browser thing work. And then in the kind of the 2000s, we had the LAMP stack, which is this old, now decrepit kind of web stack to like build a web server. And like today, we've got like this full range of AWS servers and Google Cloud servers, and we now have like this new serverless movement. It's called Lambda. It's kind of cool. Anyways, like that whole stack is that's been maturing for a long time, and people have been iterating and building on it. And so we're like right now in the early phases of this Web3 stack, which is all about putting the people at the endpoints in control, and not having a single thing in the middle that like controls everything. Right. And so that we're still in the early phases of building that infrastructure. And so when I talk about the Web3 stack, what I'm really referring to is the entire software stack from kind of the core internet protocol all the way up to the end user experience, enabling all of this to come to fruition.
But okay, so I've also heard blockchain tech like compared to the .com bubble. You have like your Amazons, your Googles, you also have like cats.com and like LiveJournal or whatever. And so like as an investor, how do you sort of look at all these options, things like Augur or specific kind of coin, and sort of separate like the winners from the losers? Like, are there a few like specific traits that you look for, or is it a bit of an educated guess,
It's all definitely educated guesses for sure.
Yeah.
Depending on what we're looking at, we have different kind of frameworks we use. So if we're looking at a layer, what we call a layer 1 protocol, so Bitcoin is a layer 1 protocol, Ethereum is a layer 1 protocol, really anything that has to solve consensus, we consider kind of a layer 1 protocol. And if we're looking at those, there's kind of a certain number of things we look for. So I talk about this in my post called the Web3 Stack. And there's like a whole bunch of teams that have come out with new ideas for consensus algorithms. And that kind of consensus is really like the base layer of the entire Web3 stack. It's really the foundation on top of which almost everything else is being built.
And consensus is just sort of like the process by which something is determined a valid transaction or not.
So the idea of determining is this transaction valid or not is a separate question. From then, the next question is, given there's all these people in the world who are submitting transactions, you need to come to some ordering of which transactions happen first, second, third.
Oh, okay.
And so consensus really more is about coming to order about which, given a set of valid transactions, in what order they come into.
Okay.
Given get network latency, nodes around the world, et cetera.
Like chronological ordering.
Yes, correct. When we're looking at like a layer 1 protocol, for example, right, the question we're really asking ourselves is like, how is this going to beat Ethereum? If you're going to claim to kind of make a run at Ethereum and have a new smart contract platform with like features X and Y and Z or whatever, like X and Y and Z need to probably be pretty compelling. Ethereum has a large head start, has a lot of mind share, it has a good moat. There's a lot of people building on Ethereum. Vitalik and the Ethereum Foundation have done a really excellent job of being as relatively impartial as I think they can be, and just promoting an open ecosystem. They're not stepping on people's toes. They're not building things that other developers want to build on, and they're just focusing on the core protocol. And like their focus has built this really strong community around them. And so if you're going to say, hey, we've got these ideas that can perhaps be better than Ethereum, they need to be really, really, really much better. And they need to be things that Ethereum is going to have too much baggage to be able to pull it off. There are good ideas out there that Ethereum will get to in the next 12 months. And so if you're telling me, well, that's the basis for your new chain, then that's just not very interesting. Like there are some things that Ethereum just cannot easily do because it's already out there, there's already people using it, and so they have a lot of baggage, right? They're just slower to move. So we really look for really deep insights about things that Ethereum cannot fundamentally accomplish. And then if those things, if that's in fact true, then can it deliver something that's 10 or 100x better? So that's kind of at the base layer. Then there's kind of a next layer that we kind of look at. We call these, in my Web3 stack post, kind of call them optional components of building in the Web3 stack. So For example, if you need to store just files somewhere, you don't really want to store files in the Ethereum blockchain, so you probably want to store them in something like IPFS, which is an interplanetary file system. Okay. If you want to do video streaming, like Ethereum nodes are not going to stream like transcode video and push video. So there's like, for example, a group called LivePeer that's building a decentralized video transcoding service. There's another group called The Graph, which if you need to do high performance queries on the Ethereum blockchain, again, like Ethereum nodes, like the Geth and Parity, for example, really aren't designed to enable like production scale, like numbers of queries on the kind of a core database. So there's a group called The Graph that's building out a way to do decentralized queries at scale. So there's all these kind of like I'll call them middleware components of things that if you're building some sort of end user application, you may want some of these pieces. And all those pieces of the stack are also currently being built out. And so when we evaluate those pieces of the stack, we're really trying to understand is like how big is the market? Like, are people going to use this? What kind of dApps may or may not need this? And are kind of going from there. And then the highest level of the stack are basically we call dApps or end user applications. So these obviously they have a UI, people click buttons on them and they do stuff. And that feels a lot more like traditional venture investing when we're investing at that layer.
Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like there's a variety of things out there and they're all kind of optimizing for these different use cases, whether it's like speed or scalability. That's actually interesting because I was sort of thinking about cryptocurrency, and I was thinking about it as like money, right? Where I like the value of a community is not to be underestimated, right? Where if people are excited about something, devoted to it, and using it, that's sort of like can guarantee something's success. Like I spend my time working to get money so that I can like do other things because I know other people value it. But it is interesting to think about how there might be like similar apps in that they use blockchain, but that have optimized for different capabilities like speed or decentralization that could be useful in like multiple places. So it's really good to get your expert insight into this, I think. I was wondering if you kind of have advice for people who are wanting to enter the space and learn more about blockchain.
Yeah, so I think if you're a developer, a really good place to get started. I think Consensus, they have a lot of great materials on kind of learning how to develop for Ethereum. And then same for the other chains, so things like EOS, things like Tezos. All the kind of the core teams building the primary chains have pretty robust documentation for getting started building there. If you don't want to just jump straight into building and you just kind of want to learn your way around the ecosystem, there's a few really good resources online I think you can kind of turn to just kind of start to get a feel of like what's going on. So probably my favorite publication is a weekly publication called Token Economy. They publish once a week every Sunday. It's tokeneconomy.co is the website. And they publish like the week, like they summarize the news for the week. They provide like commentary on it, and they highlight good insights from developers, from entrepreneurs, from investors, all over the kind of ecosystem. Really, really good weekly summary. I look forward to it every single week. My probably favorite like news source on a daily basis is called trustnodes.com or .org. It's called TrustNodes. It's excellent. If you want something that feels more like TechCrunch for crypto, like CoinDesk does a good job of kind of being TechCrunch for crypto. And then I curate a couple of Twitter lists. So if you go to my Twitter profile and go to the list section, I curate, I call it a VIP list. It's about 60 people. And then I curate just a more general list that's like 600 people. So depending on what level of noise you want in your Twitter browsing experience.
Yeah.
I will say a lot of the dialogue and action happens on Twitter.
I do like Twitter. I think it's probably similar for the AI space as well. It's sort of like these like sort of thought leaders that you can get like up-to-date news. But I guess the trouble is like if you're not on there all the time, which you probably shouldn't be on Twitter all the time, you're maybe gonna like miss something. But I like that as a resource. And are you finding these things like through word of mouth or like just creating things on your own?
I mean, I've been in the crypto space now for a little over 2 years personally, and then professionally for about a year. And this is all just kind of like, I just read stuff and I click links and like those links go all places and write recommendations from friends. So this is all pretty like, there's no hard science on this. It's just, I've looked at lots of stuff and have kind of developed my curated information feed. I did get started CoinDesk, TrustNodes, and Token Economy. And then those lists on Twitter will get you kickstarted.
Yeah.
And then from there, you can kind of create your own Twitter lists and go from there.
Yeah. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention that Udacity is coming out with a blockchain developer nano degree to sort of fill this knowledge gap. But of course, we encourage like people using as many resources as they can like get their hands on. And I think, part of why we're making this and sort of asking about these resources is we sort of value this firsthand experience. I think if you are wanting to be a developer, right, can you actually code some JavaScript or whatever to learn more about like validation and signing or some details about cryptography? And I wonder, with like respect to firsthand experience, if you ever recommend that people like buy Bitcoin or Ether and like invest. Would you like, if people have the means, would you say like go like have fun with this sort of thing, or is it for like serious players only, I guess is my question.
I think everyone should own some crypto. I'm super biased.
right.
That, so like, feel free to discount everything I'm saying. I drank the Kool-Aid a long time ago. I think this stuff is going to change the world. And so yeah, if that is correct, then you will have a lot more money in the future than you have now if you buy some Bitcoin and some Ether. So yeah, for passive investors, if you're like, look, I'm not going to go deep into all this stuff, but I want some exposure, then go to Coinbase.com, buy some Bitcoin, buy some Ether, and let it sit. And you don't need to trade it. You don't need to check prices. You don't need to read the news. Check in once a year. Like, that's fine. If you want to get more into it, that's great. The rabbit hole never ends.
Yeah, I think that is kind of what's exciting about it, though. I have heard that you, like, when asked about like Bitcoin or Ethereum, that you're like on Team Ethereum, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your reasoning behind that, or am I correct or no?
I definitely have a bias for Ethereum over Bitcoin. I will say over the last quarter or so, I've come around more to the Bitcoin view. But I still, if you told me to pick one today, I'd pick Ethereum. My basic reasoning is that, I got into crypto because I like building cool software. Like I've been an engineer since I was a kid, started a tech company right out of college. I like building stuff. I like seeing other people build stuff. The Bitcoin community is like the antithesis of building things. They really just like to yell at each other on Twitter.
It just like stays they want it to stay still.
Yes, the whole point of Bitcoin is that it does not change. Mm-hmm. And so like my inner like build cool stuff person like doesn't care for that. Yeah. So I have kind of a natural affinity towards Ethereum for that purpose. The other reason I think more practically is there's kind of two fundamentally competing hypotheses on like how do you get this global digital reserve asset that's worth many trillions of dollars. And there's like three fundamental hypotheses on this. I've written about them in a blog post on our website. It's called Paths to Tens of Trillions, and I kind of lay out these hypotheses. And so one hypothesis is like it's basically the store value hypothesis, and it just says, look, guarantee there's a fixed supply, guarantee that it's self-sovereign, guarantee that like the system doesn't break, and like that's kind of about it. And as long as you have those boxes checked, people will realize governments are evil because they print money, and they will therefore buy this thing that governments cannot inflate, and that will make it the global store value. And like that's kind of one worldview. That's very much the Bitcoin view of the world. The next view of the world is no, if you're going to get people to value this thing as money, they need to use it as money. They need to use it for commerce. And so this is kind of the idea of the utility hypothesis. Ethereum and really all the smart contract platforms kind of fall into this camp. And they're saying like, look, like you can do these trustless forms of commerce and enable people to buy X and Y and Z. Like this is, if you're going to get this thing to be money, people need to use it as money. And so those two views of the world, although they have the same general end state of it's a thing that's worth a lot of money, the means by which they get there are very different. And so I tend to kind of believe the latter more than the former.
Yeah, I think I've heard them compared to like Bitcoin as sort of like gold, like there's a limited amount of it and it just sort of like is what it is. And something like Ethereum being compared to money as a means of exchange, which I actually think is a little more Silicon Valley-y. It's a little more exciting. Some things like you can build on top of it with, I think. And it also in some ways feels a little more familiar. So with something that is like relatively new and sort of exciting, there's kind of a lot of misinformation floating around or like very sensational headlines. And so I kind of wanted to do this like myth-busting session where I like say something and maybe you can like respond to it and tell me, is it myth, is it like fact, or is it like a mix of both? Okay, so the first one is that blockchain is a fad, that it won't last.
That's kind of laughable.
And the reason being is like, I guess sort of it's proven itself at this point, would you say?
I mean, I think so. So one of my kind of favorite like lessons from history is like that the intolerant minority usually wins, which is like counterintuitive. Normally, you would just think like the majority wins, just in general for kind of in an abstract sense. What ends up typically happening is that there is a apathetic majority in kind of most things. They don't care.
Very passive.
Very passive. And they just don't care, even if they all concur on whatever the issue is. And there's some intolerant minority that like yells and screams and will fight and whatever, and they are the ones who push things forward. This is true for like all civil rights. This is true for is like hundreds of examples in history of kind of how this has played out. And so when I look at crypto today, what I realize you see is this very intolerant minority, where they're saying like, no, governments are evil. Like, stop printing money. Like, we want self-sovereignty and control. We want control of our own data. We don't want these corporations to have our data. And like, they are the intolerant minority today. And those are the diehards in crypto. And like, they are not going away. They are intolerant, and like they will stay intolerant. And like that Web3 stack is being built out. It's still hard to like mentally kind of reorient your mind around the implications of this. But as the stack gets more mature, as it becomes more usable, I expect that like people's eyes will open up and say, holy cow, the world can be different. My kind of favorite practical modern example of this is when I was a kid, the two rules of being a kid were don't get in a car with strangers and don't talk to strangers. And today, or sorry, don't meet people on the internet and don't get in a car with strangers. And today, today I call people on the internet and get in their car.
True, actually.
Right. So my point is like in my lifetime, we went from like the two cardinal rules of being a kid to like I do this every day. And I know lots of parents who send their kids in an Uber all the time. So. There's just a lot of kind of fundamental beliefs that like it can be reoriented. It just takes a little bit of time to click.
Yeah, so like sort of like a passive majority that's a little skeptical, but mostly is just passive, and then sort of this passionate minority that's like will grow as sort of these applications reveal themselves. I think that is pretty true. So okay, the second myth / perhaps fact is that blockchain can't scale. That it's too slow doing transactions to be reaching a global scale.
I mean, so this is definitely a major challenge today. It's the single largest technical challenge facing blockchains today. Just about all of the smartest people in crypto today are working feverishly on this problem. I expect we will have viable solutions in the next few years.
Is there anything like sort of promising that comes to mind? Or?
So there's kind of like, there's 6 fundamental ways to scale a blockchain. So one is you can have many smaller chains. 2 is you can have really big blocks. 3 is you can compress data on chain. 4 is you can have this idea of layer 2, so like Lightning Network and Bitcoin or Plasma and Ethereum are examples. 5 is sharding, and 6 is kind of Pareto improvements in consensus. And those are really the only fundamental ways you can do it. There are super smart people working on each of those 6, and I expect like, although on an individual basis, maybe you disagree with one or even multiple of those kind of ideologically, which there are some ideological reasons to oppose some of those concepts. As all 6 people make progress on all 6 of these things, getting better faster at the same time, you get kind of this compounding effect that most people like linearly don't, they're like, no, it's not gonna get you there. But if you actually compound them all together, you can get some very compelling improvements at the end.
Yeah, that does make sense to me. Okay, third, last one, blockchain will revolutionize the world. I think it's kind of sensational, but perhaps it's an exaggeration or just something that is like time will tell.
I mean, I really hate the word revolutionize.
Yes, perhaps that's it.
I don't think the word revolutionize is actually a word. Maybe it is. If I see it in a pitch deck now, I stop reading. And so
that's fair.
I've discounted it as no longer a word in the English language. I think it's going to change like the world, both in terms of money and governments, and as well as technology stacks with regards to people and self-sovereignty and data and privacy. I believe very strongly that those things will happen. We're still super early, but once you've seen the demo, and like there's not even a sexy demo, but once you like, it like clicks for you, like how it works, how the status quo works, and like how this works, and you're like, this is gonna happen. You can't keep this in a bottle forever.
Yeah, I think I do have. I also sort of recoil from this, like the idea of something being like revolutionary. I can almost imagine, like as someone who is kind of almost at this like passive majority level, like if tomorrow, like Amazon switched to using blockchain and like they just didn't tell me, I probably would not even notice, and it would have like changed how these transactions are working.
Well, that's the thing, right? Blockchain is like you'll never see it, right? Like
Yeah.
it by definition is virtual. Like you'll have the UI for all of your favorite apps will still be like some pretty UI, whatever, on your iPhone. It just like the back end will be different, and like it'll be subtle, but like the reason some fundamental things the way they are will change to ultimately be better for consumers.
Yes. So I kind of wanted to ask, as an investor, if it's kind of difficult investing in technology that is open source. So like right now I can go on GitHub and look at sort of the core like Bitcoin protocol and maybe like fork it and create a copy of my own and like start my own like cryptocurrency or something. So does that make it difficult to sort of invest in this technology? Or are you looking at different sort of aspects of how people use this?
It's actually a real big challenge of investing in crypto is that basically everything is open source. And that means that like competitive barriers to entry, just like it's very different. Really the only moat in crypto is network effects. And if whatever the protocol is you're building cannot accrue network effects, then it's going to be very hard for it to be meaningfully differentiated in the long run. By network effects, this is kind of a term that's thrown out there quite a bit. It's a little bit misunderstood. But the basic idea of network effects is as an additional user uses the network or the service, the value for existing users increases. So I actually wrote a blog post back in May, I think it's called On the Network Effects of Stores of Value, kind of explaining some of these core concepts about like different kinds of network effects, how to think about the strengths of relative network effects, and kind of explore some of these concepts. But yeah, when we invest, it's like an absolute key thing we look for is, okay, if the thing works, as new users use the thing, does it get better for existing users? Yeah. And we'll kind of understanding the nuances of how that will work.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because then, I think about these sort of earlier cryptocurrencies, and maybe the reason why they're so popular is because they sort of got a head start on who is using them in the first place. So my last question is, if there are people in your life who you're surprised are getting into crypto.
In my life personally, my mom owns a Bitcoin.
Yeah.
My mom falls closer to Luddite than technologists. So, she's got some Bitcoin, she's got some Ether. Who else in my personal life? Oh, I have family in Iran, and my family's Iranian, and about half of my family is in the U.S. now, and about half still in Iran. And actually, just in the last few weeks, Trump reinstated sanctions on Iran. Like the economy's kind of tanked there. People were expecting the sanctions to be removed like perpetually, and they're back. And so people are quite unhappy. There's been a lot of like protests and stuff in the street, and a lot of my family there is trying to figure out how to get money out of the country. Right. And so actually, it's very personal. So yeah, I've got family that's using crypto.
Makes a lot of sense.
To get money out.
I think those are all really interesting use cases, and there is like a little bit of a barrier of skepticism, but sometimes it just takes like one person that you trust to sort of suggest it to you to get you over that hump. So thank you for joining us and spending some time with interesting conversation. We're both on Twitter, so I was wondering if you wanted to shout out your handle or anything else.
Yeah, I'm a super colorful character on Twitter. My Twitter handle is just my name, so @Kyle Samani, KYLESAMANI.
Okay. Well, thank you to everyone who joined us, and I'll see you on the internet.
Bye.